I got pregnant after 14 years of trying, and my stepdaughter thought it was weird and voted it off the island. So, I unceremoniously booted them out of my house. My husband and I had been together for 14 years. He was 9 years older than me and had 2 kids from his first marriage. Despite wanting it, I had never been able to carry a baby to term. I miscarried several years ago at the beginning of our marriage, and nothing since. There was no rhyme or reason for it, and my husband and I had come to terms with the fact that we wouldn't add to the family. I was sad, but it is what it is. But things have been tough financially the last few years, so I consoled myself that it was for the best. Until, surprise, the week before my 35th birthday, I realized my period was late. I got a positive test, and I was honestly over the moon. If you'll excuse the cliche, my husband was excited but wanted us to wait to tell the family, which I agreed with. I knew the statistics, and I didn't want to have to field constant questions if I miscarried. Both of my stepkids were what you might call failures to launch. Neither had gone to college and seemed happy living at home or with my mother-in-law, who was much more permissive than I was. Here I was, pregnant, happy, and planning a new piece to our life that I hadn't dared to hope for in 5 or 6 years. I let myself dream a little and went to a baby store where I'd cry a little bit and ended up buying a soft grey blanket and a tiny pair of shoes. Later that same day, I had to unexpectedly pick my stepdaughter up from work. Cool, fine, no big deal. I stopped to get gas, and when I returned, she was giving me the weirdest look. So, are you, like, pregnant or something? She dug into the bag when I was out of the car. I could have lied easily and said it was for a friend, but why would I want to lie about it? I asked her if she could keep a secret. She promised she could, and I confirmed. Needless to say, it wasn't the happiest of responses. She just said, "Oh wow, that's all weird," and was quiet the rest of the ride home. To say I was a bit deflated was an understatement. But she didn't necessarily have to be happy about it. My husband and I still could be happy on our own. Even if nobody else celebrated, we could. A few days later, everything else was going along just fine. I was counting down the days until the ultrasound. Everything seemed good until my stepson decided to show me a chat between him and my stepdaughter, where she was talking about how gross it was that I was pregnant. It's embarrassing. Everybody's going to assume it's actually her kid when we're out together, and just generally not very nice things. When she was back home later, I came out to talk to her while she was watching TV with my husband. I tried to be chill, but my brain was going a million miles a minute. I asked her how she felt about the baby, and she responded with an eye roll. I asked again and told her that I really wanted to know because it impacted her life too. She started to get irritated with me. She said she was tired and had a long day, and could I just drop it? Maybe this is where I messed up, but no, I couldn't drop it now. I kept asking her to talk, but she kept refusing until she finally decided to drop a bomb. You should just get the baby garbage because this whole thing is a thing weird. Honestly, I'm kind of shocked at this point. I knew that she wasn't delighted, but damn, that's a whole other level. It was like getting smacked in the face with a sock full of nickels. I started crying, thanked her for being honest like an idiot, and then left the room. A little while later, my husband came into the room where I was sobbing my guts out. I assumed he was going to try to comfort me or at least give me more context to soften the blow, which he does a lot when one of the kids says something awful to me. He sat down, put his arm around me, and opened with, "Maybe we should consider it." He must have seen murder in my eyes, because he rushed on with how happy he was, but we weren't really in the best place financially, but he just started a new job. But it's hard enough with the 2 kids already, but the kids aren't on board. I told him over my dead body. This was a baby that I'd wanted for 14 years, and it wasn't getting aborted over that. It was a miracle baby, not a contestant to be voted off the island. I said some other things that I'm not proud of, stuffed some clothes in a bag, and came to my parents' house. I've been here for 3 days now, and nobody has reached out to me. Not a thing peep. I just don't even know where to go from here. I feel like I'm surrounded by insane people that are all just looking out for their own interests. At least my parents are excited. I guess I can't say that I am anymore. I left to stay at my parents' house and hadn't heard from my husband in 3 days. To be honest, I didn't want to see my husband at all. I had no desire after his confession. My parents at least were absolutely delighted over the pregnancy. I'm an only child, and my mom had always wanted more but had infertility problems too. They went with me to my first ultrasound. They cried with me. They bought me a cake. My dad carved a little pumpkin with an amorphous blob on it that looked suspiciously like that weird, amazing amorphous blob on the sonogram screen. It was sweet. The day after the scheduled ultrasound, and after about 2 weeks of radio silence, I received a text from my husband saying that we needed to talk, and I advised him that he could come to talk to me in person. We chose to meet at a neutral public location, as my parents didn't really want his face darkening their doorstep, and I agreed because I didn't want him tracking figurative poop all over my safe place. So we talked, or rather, I talked. I informed him of how hurt I was, mostly by his agreement with my stepdaughter. He said he understood. I informed him that I would not be aborting for the comfort of an overgrown toddler. He nodded his head sagely. I informed him how the ultrasound went. He looked interested. I informed him that he and his children would be moving out of my house within 30 days. He was somewhat less in agreement on this point. Dear reader, I honestly had no less to give at this point. He had let me stew for days and days by myself. I'm not sure if his tactic was to let me suck myself into an anxiety vortex, as I want to do and come crying back as I have before, but no more. I can only assume those days I spent buried beneath blankets served as a chrysalis because I was not the same person when I went out as when I went in. I wanted them out of my house. The house that I bought before our marriage. The house that was in only my name. Those bricks were designed to hold happiness, not petty comments at miserable people disguising their own black hearts with my tendency to see the best in them. It was mine. And as selfish as I'm sure someone will tell me it is, it was mine alone to fill as I chose. And I no longer chose them. I wish I could say that my story ends with me happily getting fat and filling up a nursery with baby things, but it's not that kind of story. Around the time my husband and his kids moved their last box out, an ultrasound confirmed that my baby didn't survive. To say I was devastated would be an understatement. But at least I had my own space to grieve, not only for my baby, but for the family and marriage that had been my life for almost 15 years. I'm going to be okay. I am okay. I am also sad and discouraged and more than a little hollow. But I'm no longer held down by 300+ pounds of dead weight in my home. After I unceremoniously kicked my husband and his 2 children to the curb, they moved back in with my then mother-in-law. She was a controlling, cold person who enjoyed nothing more than puppeteering her children and grandchildren with an open hand full of money, all the while hiding a close fist full of anger and resentment behind her back. Despite knowing this very well, all 3 moved back in with her. She died 8 weeks later. As far as I know, my ex-husband and his kids are still living in that same house, as it's now his. According to his Facebook, he's had a few relationships, but nothing seems to stick. Gee, I wonder why. After all, they're such a lovely bunch. Since the children were adults, and we had little in the way of commingled assets, our divorce was declared legal almost a year to the day after I filed. I honestly expected my ex to put up more of a fight, but it seems that his mother's death took it out of him. I guess I can't say that she never did anything good for me. After all of this, I had no desire to seek another relationship. The universe seemed to have other plans when I randomly ran into my ex-boy.